welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're wading into something that so many of you have pointed out, a real systemic puzzle. You've sent us sources, articles, essays, even personal notes that all circle this beautiful, maddening absurdity.
Yeah.
That there's this massive unspoken gap in our education. I mean, we spent years on igneous rocks calculating the volume of cylinder.
Or the subjunctive tense.
Exactly. But when it came to the one thing that completely governs our adult lives, money, the curriculum just went silent.
And that silence, it's, as you said, it's a kind of cold joke played on every generation.
Right.
And our mission today isn't just to complain, it's to really dissect it. We need to understand why. Why is this omission so systemic? We're peeling back the historical layers, the economic incentives, and the psychology that created this vacuum.
It's like trying to find the instruction manual after you've already been thrown out of the plane.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this. So the central frustration, it really starts with the paradox of the first paycheck, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It's that moment of realization. One source called it being slapped awake.
That's a great way to put it.
You look at the deductions, the net total, the reality of rent, of taxes, and it just hits you. All those years of school prepared you for. Well, for none of this.
It's the paradox of the shadow. Money is. It's like a shadow standing right behind you from the time you were little. It decides everything, the food you eat, the healthcare you get. But the instruction we all get implicitly is keep going, don't look right at it, and definitely don't ask too many questions.
And the cost of that silence it's immediate. It's not just that you didn't learn about interest rates.
Right.
It's that you didn't learn about the stakes of those rates.
Exactly. When we talk about what was missed, it's so much more than just budgeting. We're talking about core financial literacy, the actual language of it all.
You mentioned a few terms from the sources. Cash flow, interest rates.
And the time value of money,
Which, to someone who wasn't taught, it just sounds like Wall Street jargon.
It does, but it's really the difference between stability and chaos.
Okay, so break that down. The time value of money.
It's a simple concept, really. $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow.
Why?
Because $1 you have today can be put to work. It can be invested, it can earn interest, it can compound. If you don't get that, you don't understand the crippling cost of waiting.
Right.
Every year you put off saving for retirement or paying down debt, the gap just gets exponentially wider, all because you missed out on that compounding cycle.
It makes the school system feel exactly like that Kafkaesque building the sources describe, this anonymous, sprawling place. You navigate it, you pass the test, you get out, and then you realize the real test is in a language they never taught you. They taught us how to calculate distance, but not how to navigate the economic terrain of our own lives.
And the feeling is immense. The injustice is sharp because the system refuses to teach you the rules, but then it evaluates your entire life based on how you play the game.
They cared so much about your GPA.
Deeply. But life cares about your debt-to-income ratio, your ability to handle a surprise car repair, and I think most critically, your opportunity costs.
And that's a concept that is so often just left out. What is an opportunity cost in this context?
It's not just about what you spend, it's about what you gave up by making that choice.
Okay.
So you spend $500 on a spontaneous trip. The cost isn't just the $500, it's the potential growth that money could have had if you'd invested it over, say, 20 years.
So school teaches you to look at one transaction.
Right. But life demands you see the ripple effect over decades.
Right.
And without that perspective, we are structurally primed to make choices that are just self-defeating.
Precisely.
And to really get this, we have to look at the roots of the silence. And they're historical. They're deeply cultural. The sources show that traditionally traditionally, talking about money was seen as, impure, it was undignified or lacking in grace, it was just grubby.
So it wasn't just considered bad manners, it was a moral judgment layered on top of people's own discomfort with money.
Exactly that. They layered morality over their own lack of knowledge. The belief was profound. If children understood money too early, they would become obsessed.
Greedy.
Pragmatic, greedy, and exploitative. Yes. And that fear of, let's call it spiritual corruption, it historically outweighed the much more practical risk of growing up financially helpless.
But hold on, doesn't that explanation, the fear of greed, clash a bit with the push for education to be vocational? If the goal was to make compliant workers, wouldn't you want people to be pragmatic?
That's a fantastic question, and that's where the moral and the structural arguments really intersect.
Okay.
So initially, yes, it was a moral argument, but as the industrial system grew, that moral argument became a very convenient smokescreen for the structural reality. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Go on.
The system was, well, it was implicitly created to produce employees.
Cogs.
Cogs, not autonomous individuals who control the cogs. And what does financial knowledge give you? Power?
It gives you power and it gives you choice.
So how does that play out practically?
If you really understand financial cycles, how to use debt, how to generate passive income, even at a basic level, you gain the power to say no. A person with savings, with assets, with more than one income stream, you can't easily force them into bad working conditions. You can't trap them with a minimum wage. They have leverage.
Because they control their own time.
That's it. Financial knowledge fundamentally converts time back into a resource you control.
Yeah.
And a system that was designed in the factory era, it just doesn't know what to do with people who have that kind of autonomy. They're unpredictable.
So the simplest solution is just don't teach it.
Don't teach it. It's avoided not because money is bad, but because understanding it is empowering to the individual. And that's potentially disruptive to a predictable labor pool. And that inertia leads us right into the mechanisms of modern complicity. It wasn't just old morality keeping things quiet. It was industrial logic dressed up as civics.
Modern schooling was built fundamentally to make compliant citizens, people who could do routine tasks without asking difficult questions.
And money is the ultimate difficult question.
It is. The moment you start teaching financial reality, you open the door to all these uncomfortable questions about resource control.
Like, why do some people have so much and others so little?
Exactly. Why does the hardest physical labor often pay the least? When those questions come up, the established order gets challenged. So the system chose silence. It focused on things that are quantifiable and, not controversial.
And that silence gets worse because of institutional ambiguity, the power without a face that Kafka described. There's no committee that issues a memo saying, don't teach finance. It persists.
It's the perfect failure mechanism, isn't it? The teachers assume the state covers it, the state assumes the community teaches it, the community assumes you'll just pick it up.
And the result is a total failure.
Total. And it's so frustrating because so much of the curriculum today is still running on outdated software from the 1980s. It was designed for a world of predictable careers and stable housing. That world is gone.
And where there's a vacuum of knowledge, the market is more than happy to rush in.
Oh, absolutely. And this leads to that critical link. Ignorance creates profit.
This is one of the most painful parts of the source material.
It really is. The financial industry benefits immensely from the ignorance of young people. We're talking massive profit margins built on the assumption that you do not understand the fine print.
Can you give us a concrete example? How does that ignorance translate directly into profit for them?
Sure. Think about credit card minimum payments. An educated consumer knows that if you only pay the minimum, the principal barely moves for years. The company just collects maximum interest.
Right.
But an ignorant consumer sees that small number and thinks, great, I can afford this. The whole system is designed to encourage debt longevity, not quick repayment.
Or payday loans.
Or payday loans, which prey on desperation with these incredibly high interest rates that are just financially devastating. All because the borrower doesn't have the basic numeracy to calculate the real long-term cost. Ignorance isn't just a lack of knowledge, it's an exploited resource.
And when that foundational instruction is missing, what happens? People turn to the worst possible place for information.
Social media.
The echo chamber of status and consumption.
Exactly. On these platforms, money is instantly stripped of all its complexity as a tool or a skill. It's just a symbol.
The cars, the travel, the watches.
The appearance of effortless wealth. And it reinforces a totally destructive cycle.
It teaches you to focus on the outside appearance instead of the inward cash flow.
Correct. You learn to model the result of wealth, usually with money you don't even have, instead of learning the disciplined process of building it. The culture just encourages showing off money that's often borrowed, which just makes the whole problem worse.
And that creates a generation that's fluent in brand names.
But completely mute in the language of debt management.
So let's shift to the personal cost of this, the psychological weight. It leaves us with what one source called a subtle illiteracy.
Yeah.
You feel totally fluent in high-level school subjects, but you're functionally mute in the world's primary language.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that subtle illiteracy, it quickly becomes a profound existential crisis.
How so?
You're being judged by this cold, faceless system bills, credit scores, loan officers that you were never, ever taught how to navigate. It's like a character in a Camus novel facing this indifferent universe. The world makes demands you were structurally unprepared for.
And the most damaging part is that we internalize that failure.
Absolutely. When financial mistakes happen, student loans, credit card debt people internalize it as proof that they are inadequate or not smart enough or not a real grown-up. They blame their personality or their discipline for a hole that the system deliberately failed to fill. They mistake a missed skill for a personal flaw.
And this is where that intergenerational trap snaps shut. Our parents didn't teach us.
Because they weren't taught. And the only thing they passed down was anxiety and maybe 2 incredibly vague pieces of advice.
Don't overspend.
And study hard for stability.
Right.
But those instructions were built for an economy that just doesn't exist anymore. They never defined what stability even means in a world with inflation and automation and insane housing costs. They passed on the anxiety, but not the tool to fix it.
And that lack of a tool, it impacts our whole definition of freedom. We end up chasing these abstract goals like enough money or 0 debt.
Right.
But because we don't have the tools to measure our progress,
Yeah.
we're still just guided by panic and fear, not by clarity. It feels like you're always waiting for your life to truly start once the financial fog lifts.
So what's the path forward? I have to adopt a new mindset. The sources call it a dialogue with the structure.
Okay.
We have to recognize the system isn't necessarily malicious, but it is old, it is slow, and it's running on outdated software. The key isn't anger. It's clear, calm observation of the present.
And that observation is the first step toward, I guess, internal freedom.
Yes.
Just internalizing the financial literacy is a missed skill, not a moral failing. That realization that anyone can learn this, it provides immediate relief from the shame.
And that's where we turn the philosophy into practical action. The path to autonomy starts with small, deliberate steps.
Okay, like what?
First, redefine money. Stop seeing it as an idol to worship or a terror to fear or status symbol. See it for what it is, a tool, like a hammer or a spreadsheet, something that has to be learned patiently.
And you don't need to jump into advanced trading strategies on day one.
No, please don't. The sources say to start deceptively small.
Oh, small.
Track every dollar you spend for just 3 days. That's it. Or set a simple daily limit for non-essential spending and just stick to it. These are quiet little footsteps that start building the habit of observation. You're just gathering data.
What about the bigger fear, though? That heavy existential dread about ruin or bankruptcy that can paralyze people.
That's where you use the Stoic or Camus method. You confront the absurd fear directly. The monster in the dark is always scarier than the one on the page. So you sit down and you write out the absolute concrete worst-case scenario. If I lose my job, this is what happens. I move in with X, I apply for Y, I cut my spending to Z.
You demystify the anxiety by giving it a name and a plan.
Precisely. Once you document it, the vague, terrifying monster becomes just an old door. You realize even the worst case is survivable, it's manageable. And that realization is so empowering. It shifts you from being guided by panic to being guided by a plan.
So what does this all mean? The promised land isn't some guarantee of wealth. It's not winning the lottery.
No, it is clarity and autonomy. Freedom is not being controlled by a lack of understanding. It's knowing you have the skills to manage and respond to whatever life throws at you financially.
Even if you're starting decades late.
Even then, you're no longer judged by fear, you're guided by knowledge.
That really summarizes the insight from this deep dive. The silence around money was created by this potent mix of history, fear, systemic inertia, and profit. But understanding where it came from frees us. We can stop internalizing the system's failures and take full responsibility for our own learning.
And that leads to the final necessary thought. Society forces us to learn these skills by paying the price.
With mistakes, with debts.
With disappointment, with lost opportunity. So if we accept that reality, the most important question isn't, why wasn't I taught? But rather, in a world run by money, do you want to be the person who understands the rules of the game and can maneuver within it, or the one who is forever standing on the outside, confusing the system's failure for their own?
And that question, more than any textbook,
That question is your new guiding light.